Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings that happened from our past couple of days, some injury updates, some pieces of news to talk about, plus we've got a couple of trade rumors involving Philadelphia, the New York Rangers, Vegas, and a couple of other teams. We'll get to all the updates from our past couple of days coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. And also don't forget to stay tuned for my June 27th and June 28th live draft video, as well as my July 1st live free agency video. I'm going to have times getting closer and closer, but do not forget to stay tuned for those dates, the 27th and 28th of June and the 1st of July, as I will be having live streams on those days talking about all the movement that's going to be happening over those days. So definitely over stay tuned for that. Today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. So as usual, we'll look at the signings first. We are very nearly caught up. We have the signings from this past week, the last week of May. So we got a couple of signings here, and we're going to be getting closer and closer to finishing up the signing portion of the videos. So we got 7 signings here to talk about in today's video. So we're going to start off with the Vancouver Canucks. Most of these are entry-level contracts. So first up, the Vancouver Canucks have signed right winger Andrei Ravinskis, who's 22 years old. He's an undrafted player. He gets a 2-year ELC with an AV of $873,000. They'll begin to start next year. Ravinskis had a pretty good season. I think goes over in the NCAA. Had a pretty good year for the Canucks, and I think eventually Ravinskis could be a really solid pickup here for the Vancouver Canucks long term in their bottom 6. So interesting ELC signing, but Ravinskis gets a 2-year ELC. Now the next signing we're talking about here is with the Tampa Bay Lightning, as they have given 25-year-old left winger, undrafted guy, Wojciech Stachowiak, I might be pronouncing that wrong, but they gave him a 1-year deal with the AV of league minimum. So it's an interesting deal for him, and I think he could be a decent bottom-end guy for the Tampa Bay Lightning, maybe a call-up option. So interesting note there. But Stachowiak has signed a 1-year ELC with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Then we saw Seattle Kraken sign one of their better defensive prospects in their system. That is 4th-round pick from the 2022 draft, Tyson Jugnoth, who's a 21-year-old left-shot defenseman, to a 3-year ELC with AV of $950,000. He was playing over in the junior leagues, so he had a really good season over in the juniors. I think eventually could be a really solid 3rd, maybe 2nd pair defenseman for the Seattle Kraken. So interesting note there, but Jugnoth has signed a ELC with the Seattle Kraken. Then we saw the Carolina Hurricanes give an ELC to 2021 6th-round pick Nikita Quapp, who's a goaltending prospect, 22 years old. He gets a 2-year contract with the AV of $775,000. That was for this past season, for the end of it. Plus next season, Quapp, I think eventually could be a really good backup, maybe tandem goaltender for the Carolina Hurricanes. Might even be their goaltender of the future. So just note there, but Quapp was given a 2-year ELC with the Carolina Hurricanes. Then we saw Seattle Kraken add some more depth for their team by re-signing one of their depth players from this past year, and that was center/right winger John Hayden. Hayden has been bouncing around over the past couple of years, had some time in the NHL levels, most time at the AHL level. It's a 2-year extension with AV of league minimum with the Seattle Kraken. This past year had a goal and 2 points in 20 NHL games. Also had a couple of points at the AHL level. So Hayden looks like a pretty good call-up option, potentially maybe like a depth guy, 4th-line guy for Seattle Kraken. So they obviously liked him enough to sign him to another extension, and he will remain with that team. And then lastly, we got 2 more ELCs from the Utah Mammoth with former Arizona Coyotes 1st-round picks. First, the Utah Mammoth have given Daniil Boot, who's a 12th overall pick back in the 2023 draft, a 3-year ELC with AV of $950,000. Boot was playing over in the KHL this past year, had a really good season, actually won the KHL trophy with his team. He's a left winger, 20 years old, and Boot looks like he's going to be a very fantastic and hard to play against top 6, maybe even top 9 forward for the Utah Mammoth. He's 6'6", so good luck defending against that, but Boot is going to be a very fantastic addition there for Utah. And then they got another 1st-round pick in the same draft to play on the same team this past year, signed as well as Utah Mammoth signed 6th overall pick back in the 2023 draft. Dmitry Simashev is a left-shot defenseman, also 28 years old, gets a 3-year ELC with AV of $950,000. Simashev was also playing on the KHL on the exact same team Boot was. So interesting note there, I think Simashev long-term has the potential to be a solid top 4, if not top pair defenseman defenseman for that Utah team and should definitely challenge for a roster spot right out of the gate this year. So interesting note there. But those two top-end picks from Arizona's a couple of years back, and But and Simashev who signed their ELCs in Utah and will be able to try and challenge for a roster spot this training camp. So lots of interesting stuff. We saw Simashev, we saw But in Utah, we saw Jugnoth in Seattle, and Quapp in Carolina all signed ELCs, and we also saw Hayden get an extension in Seattle. So interesting note there. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. So when it comes to the injury updates, first with the Florida Panthers, Sam Reinhart, who missed Game 3 and Game 4 with a lower body injury, Nico Mikkola, who missed Game 4 with undisclosed injury, and AJ Greer, who missed Game 4 with undisclosed injury, all returned to game action in Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Final that the Carolina Hurricanes did wind up losing. So Florida gets 3 key guys back, a top 4 defenseman, bottom 6 forward, and top 6 forward, and they end the series in the Eastern Conference Final. So very good stuff there, as those guys were able to get back for Florida. Then we saw Edmonton, Connor Brown, who missed Game 4 due to an upper body injury, will also miss Game 5 for the Edmonton Oilers. That's a really bad blow there for the Oilers, as they will lose Connor Brown. Well, Zach Hyman is a little bit more of a concerning one, as he has underwent wrist surgery, and after sustaining that injury in Game 4, will most likely miss the rest of the playoffs due to it. So that is a horrible blow for the Oilers. Maybe if the Stanley Cup Final goes 6 to 7 games, Hyman could play at some point, but that's going to be a big blow for the Oilers, as Hyman, who has been a monster in the playoffs, is going to most likely miss the rest of the season. So it's a bad blow there for Edmonton. Rupe Hintz, who missed Game 3 with a lower body injury, returned to game action in Game 4, so that's really fantastic news there for the Stars as they get Hintz back. Carolina's Jalen Chatfield remains out day-to-day with an undisclosed injury and missed Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Final due to it. Well, Sean Walker also remains out day-to-day with undisclosed injury and missed Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Final. So, in what was their last game of the season, the Canes were without Chatfield and Walker. So those are big blows there for the Hurricanes, as Walker has been a really solid third pair guy, Chatfield third or second pair guy, both continue to miss time. And then we saw Winnipeg's Adam Lowry underwent hip surgery and will be out the next 5 to 6 months. So that's a bad blow there for the Jets. Their captain and third line center Adam Lowry is going to be out for a while for the Winnipeg Jets, and most likely will miss the first few weeks, if not the first month or two of the season. So that's a bad blow there for the Jets as they lose a solid top 9 forward due to injuries. So interesting note there, but it's good to see that guys like Rupe Hintz, Sam Reinhart, and Nico Mikkola all return to game action. But bad news to see guys like Connor Brown, Jalen Chatfield, Sean Walker, Adam Lowry, and now Zach Hyman all be out with injuries, and hopefully they won't be out for an overly long period of time. But some interesting injury updates from the past couple of days. Next, going over to just a couple of quick pieces of news I want to discuss here today. So first, when it comes to coaching, New Jersey has officially hired Brad Shaw as their new assistant. We talked about how they left off some of their assistants a couple of weeks back. We also talked about how Shaw was not going to return to Philadelphia, and there was some people linking him to New Jersey. Well, he has officially been hired by the Devils. So Brad Shaw, who was an interim head coach towards the end of the season for Philadelphia after being an assistant coach earlier, has officially signed on to be with the New Jersey Devils staff. So interesting note there, and it's a pretty solid hire in my opinion for the Devils. For the Penguins, it seems like Mitch Love as well as DJ Smith are two front runners for the Penguins' vacant coaching position. It does sound like they haven't officially finalized anything yet, but DJ Smith, who did coach Ottawa for a long period of time as their head coach, on top of being an assistant coach in Los Angeles, is a front runner, as is Caps assistant coach Mitch Love, who has been with the Caps since they brought in Carberry. So interesting note there, but it seems like Love and Smith might be from the front runners or the finalists for Penguins in their coaching search. So interesting note there. When it comes to the Boston Bruins, there was some reporting, I think it was Wednesday night or Thursday morning, that said that Marco Sturm is maybe the front runner for the Bruins coaching update, and there were a couple of reports that said that Sturm was going to be hired as the Boston Bruins head coach. Well, not so fast. Apparently, according to some recent reports, I think it was from Elliotte Friedman, he says that Sturm is still in the mix for the head coaching position, could potentially even still be the front runner, but there's been no official confirmation that Sturm is going to be the new head coach in Boston. It still seems like it's probably leaning more that way than any other way, but it definitely seems like it hasn't been officially announced yet. So keep your eye on Boston. It sounds like they are getting closer and closer to a new update when it comes to their coaching search, but Sturm has not officially at this point been named the new head coach in Boston. And last, going over to a couple of players going overseas for the New Jersey Devils, one of their top 9 forwards and one of their pending UFAs is not going to be brought back, as Tomas Tatar has been bouncing around over the past couple of years. Spent a couple of years in Montreal, had some years in Seattle, had the past year in a couple of seasons in New Jersey, has officially signed overseas. I think it was in the Swiss League. Can't guarantee that. Might have been one of the other leagues, but he is heading overseas to Europe. So Tatar will leave the NHL for a time being and go overseas. So very interesting note there. Well, Alexei Kolosov, who signed a contract last offseason with the Philadelphia Flyers, was basically a third stringer last year, was called up on multiple occasions, played at some points for Fedotov and Urson, is apparently heading back to KHL. Even though he has a contract with the Philadelphia Flyers, it sounds like Kolosov will head back to the KHL and play another season over in the KHL. So interesting note there. I'm not sure what that means for Philadelphia and Kolosov going forward, but it does sound like Kolosov will be heading back to KHL after playing there for a couple of years. So interesting note there, but Tatar going to be heading overseas, not trying to earn a new contract elsewhere. Kolosov is also going to be heading overseas back to the KHL. New Jersey has hired Brad Shaw as their assistant. Love and Smith are both the frontrunners for the Pittsburgh Penguins head coaching vacancy, and while Sturm was announced at some points on Wednesday that maybe he could wind up being the new head coach in Boston, it's not officially out, although he is one of the frontrunners. So interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So going over to a couple of trade rumors, we got a handful of things here to talk about in today's video. There continues to be more and more rumors as the weeks go on and we get closer and closer to the draft and free agency. So we have a lot of pieces of news here to talk about, so we're going to try and get through this rather quickly. So we're going to start off with the St. Louis Blues. Chris Johnston, I think, was on the Chris Johnston show. I might be wrong in that. Was also mentioning some offer chicanes. We talked about Maverick Bourque in our last video. Well, apparently another potential offer candidate, according to Chris Johnston, is Joel Hofer in St. Louis. Now, Hofer is currently the backup to Jordan Binnington, but he had a pretty solid season. Had, I think, a .904 save percentage, a sub-3 GAA, had a winning record. Like, Hofer was pretty good, even though Binnington was their starter and was the starter for the playoffs. Hofer didn't have a bad season, and maybe eventually Hofer could take the reins for Binnington. Now, the Blues are very tight against the cap. There's a very good chance they'll be able to put Krug on long-term injury reserve with him potentially not being back from his injury. But even at that, they only have about, I think it was like 10 million cap space. And while they don't have too many players they need to sign, they're going to have to sign a couple of people. So that's led some people to think maybe Hofer could wind up being an offer sheet candidate. Now, I think if there was a team out there who maybe offer sheet him like $2.5 million on like a 1 to 2 year deal to be a team's tandem partner with one of their goaltenders they already have, like, I would not be one of the surprised. So given the weakness of the UFA market and what the potential high ask would be for guys like Demko, Gibson, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, I could see some teams potentially trying to target a Hofer for like a third round pick or a second round pick, because I think Hofer eventually could be the starter at the NHL level on some teams. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Hofer as a potential offer sheet candidate, according to Chris Johnston. Going over to the Calgary Flames and Ottawa Senators, just want to really quickly update this here. In our last video, we talked about how Rasmus Andersson could potentially be a trade target for the Ottawa Senators. Well, according to, I think it was David Pagnotta, he was talking about this and says that Rasmus Andersson has, I think it was like a 6-team no trade list, and Ottawa is on that trade list. So it sounds like Andersson was probably not going to wait to go to Ottawa. So it seems that that sort of trade has fizzled out, and it doesn't sound like Ottawa will be trying to go after Rasmus Andersson. They may have some interest, but it doesn't seem like at this point that Andersson will really want to go to Ottawa. So interesting note there, but after all those rumors speculating Andersson could be a trade target for the Ottawa Senators, it sounds like he will not be traded to Ottawa, so interesting note there. Next one, we're to New York Rangers. Now, we talked about this and Keandre Miller and the New York Rangers in season and a little bit towards last off season, but this has come up again, and Elliotte Friedman says that the New York Rangers are sort of getting feelers out there for Keandre Miller. Miller is an RFA with arbitration rights. There are a whole bunch of people out there who think that after the slow start Miller had to the season last year, that there's a potentiality that even though he has a slow start, his arbitration number could be really high, and the Rangers may not want to do that. So after already trading Jacob Trouba earlier in season, there's a potentiality that they could try and make a move with Keandre Miller. Now, I think for a lot of teams, like I think back when he was being mentioned in trade rumors in season, teams like Vancouver, Anaheim, and San Jose came up as potential trade options. I would think a team like Calgary could potentially have some interest. A team like maybe Columbus could have some interest. Maybe a team like Detroit. Like, there's a couple of teams out there who I think could use a young top 4 defenseman. So I wouldn't be one bit surprised if the Rangers traded him, especially if they feel like his AAV would be too high if he went to arbitration. So we're going to have to keep our eye on the New York Rangers, but Elliotte Friedman does say that Keandre Miller is getting shopped, and personally, I will not be one bit surprised, given the way the Rangers have been playing over the past little while, that the Rangers might wind up moving Keandre Miller, especially if it makes sense for them, and the return is not too bad, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, we went to Philadelphia Flyers. According to William James of Philly Hockey Now, he was talking about Philadelphia Flyers and says that there's a potentiality that they could make a trade with the New York Islanders, as he says that the Flyers, they have a very weak center group right now. They have a couple of younger guys that are going to be coming in the next couple of years, like a Jet Luchenko, but at this point in time, they don't have a whole bunch of really solid centers. So he says there's a possibility that the Flyers could try and pry one of Matthew Barzal or Bo Horvat from the New York Islanders organization. He says that if Darvish is open to potentially moving one of their top line long-term signed centers, then he says that the Philadelphia Flyers would be a very prime target for the New York Islanders to try and pry Barzal or Horvat out of there. And I think it makes some sense. Like, I still think Philadelphia needs to go through their rebuild, potentially trade a guy like Rasmus Andersson, get more picks, more prospects. But they've still been hanging around there in the Eastern Conference playoff race over the past couple of years. So if they feel that they are close to making the playoffs, then I would not be one bit surprised if they tried to add to the center group, given the fact that that's their one spot that's really a weakness for the Philadelphia Flyers team. Sure, they have a couple of holes in the blue line, but I think the center group is a little bit more of a pressing need for the Flyers. So given that they're on longer term deals, if it makes sense for them, I could see them trying to target a guy like Barzal or Horvat. Like, there's time for the long term, so getting them as like their top line center or their second line center behind Couturier for the time being, I think might be a smart move there for the Islanders. So I won't say it's a guarantee that either Barzal or Horvat get moved, but we have heard both of those names in the trade rumor mill, and I could see that if those guys are out there and potentially in play, Philadelphia being a team who needs some center help, could try and go after them, although I do think they should personally try and continue with their rebuild instead of trying to go after some big name players. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on the Flyers as they could potentially try and target Barzal and Horvat in the trade market. Next, going over to Jonathan Marchessault. Now, we've talked about a couple of Nashville Predators who could potentially be moved this offseason. In my offseason preview video, I mentioned pending UFAs such as Sijins and Bunting, and potentially even a guy like Steven Stamkos, but apparently another guy who could potentially be wanting out of Nashville after only one season there is Jonathan Marchessault. Now, according to Frank Seravalli, Marchessault would be open to a trade and potentially getting out of the Nashville organization. He signed a 5-year deal, I think it was, at a $5.5 million cap hit with the Nashville Predators in the offseason. He had a pretty good season. I think he had like above 50 points, 25 plus goals. Like, he had a pretty good season over in Nashville, but the Preds were an awful team. They finished bottom 3 in the NHL. Like, that team was awful. So with that in mind, Marchessault might not want to stay in Nashville if they have to go through a retool, a rebuild, and the return that they could get from Marchessault might make some sense for the Predators. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee by any means, because Marchessault was one of their better players this year. They could see him try and stay and maybe try and keep him, but if the offer was right and it made sense and Marchessault really did want out, I could see it happen. When Frank Seravalli was mentioning this, he mentioned a potential landing spot as Montreal, given the fact that I think he has connections to the Canadiens. But on top of that, Elliotte Friedman mentioned that he's played for Vegas, he played for Florida, and he played for Nashville, which are all no-tax states. So he thinks that if Marchessault was to get traded, which Elliotte Friedman does think is a possibility, that maybe he could continue to try and go to a no-tax state. So you're looking at like a Seattle, a Carolina, a Dallas, or a Vegas, or Florida. So like maybe a reunion between Marchessault and Vegas is in the cards. Like, I don't know. But at this point, I could see Marchessault, with the poor play from the Nashville Predators last year, potentially wanting out and potentially wanting to get moved. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the Vegas Golden Knights. According to Frank Seravalli, he says that the Golden Knights are potentially the best landing spot for Mitch Marner. Now, I don't know if the Knights are going to be going after him. Like, they may try and go after someone cheaper with their tough cap situation, but we know that Vegas is always going after the big fishes. Like, they always go after the big time free agents, the big time trade targets. They always try and make their team better. After losing to Edmonton in 5 games, I completely believe that this front office and Kelly McCrimmon and company are going to be going hard after some of the top free agents. Now, like I said, I don't think it's a guarantee to go after Marner. I could see him go after Besser, go after Ehlers, maybe to some extent go after a guy like Sam Bennett. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But I think Marner would be a very good fit. Like, you put Marner into that team, once again, it's a no tax state, so maybe you could sign Marner for like 11.5 million, where most other teams will have to pay 13.5 million for him. So given that fact, it might make some sense for the Vegas Golden Knights. And on top of that, add Marner to a lineup. You could have a Marner Eichel Stone line. Like, that would be a scary line to play against if you're a team like Los Angeles or Edmonton. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. No guarantees that the Golden Knights are going to go after Mitch Marner, but with it becoming more and more likely that Marner will hit the free agent market, it's seeming more and more likely that the Golden Knights could be one of the landing spots for Marner, and Frank Seravalli does think that Vegas would be a very good landing spot for Marner. And personally, I agree. I think teams like Vegas and Los Angeles would be at the top of my list as teams I think Marner would probably probably go to. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Marner and Vegas as we get closer and closer to free agency, as there's a potentiality we could see a signing of Marner going to Vegas in the very near future. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's all I'm going to talk for today. I love you guys' thoughts. Do you see a Marner in Vegas fit? Do you think Marchessault could get dealt by the Nashville Predators? Do you think the Rangers will end up moving Keandre Miller? Could Philadelphia try and target a Matthew Barzal or a Horvat? Do you think that the Ottawa Senators will now not trade for Rasmus Andersson? And could Hofer be an offer sheet candidate? Definitely your thoughts on all of those things, plus the injury updates and the signings from the past couple of days. Definitely your thoughts on all of that and the news pieces down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and for those who are subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never do this without you guys. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, and don't forget to stay tuned for my June 27th, 28th, and July 1st live streams. Don't forget to stay tuned for that. I also do a blog to make news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I'll link that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.